first time ever being in an AA or NA meeting was in jail. And it's not because I wanted to go.
No, I needed to get out of the room for an hour. Yeah, it's rough. Wait, I have a question. So as someone who probably dealt with the same catering, what was your least favorite meal? I'll go first. Chicken sausage.
I had a friend who worked in the kitchen and he's like, yeah, when we cut the chicken and turkey, it literally says chicken butts on it. Like they just cut off the worst parts. And we're like, yeah, send that to the jail.
Welcome to Recovery Cast, the podcast where we share authentic stories from influential voices about the joys of life in mental health and addiction recovery and the journeys that led us here. Today, our guest is Kody Green. Kody is a mental health advocate, certified recovery coach, and content creator known online as the schizophrenic hippie. After symptoms of psychosis in college led to substance use and incarceration, Kody found stability and sobriety in 2015 and has since built a national platform sharing his lived experience and schizophrenia and addiction. Kody, welcome to the podcast. So excited to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming down the road. You are a fellow Wisconsinite, right?
Yeah, I'm probably like the person who had to take the least trip to get here, which I was super pumped about. I love being able to do like local stuff.
Yes, especially on a Monday morning.
Oh my gosh.
I know travel, right? Okay. So before we kick this off, as a fellow Wisconsinite, I want you to take us back. Tell me one hilarious kind of like unhinged kid Kody story.
Unhinged Cody
Not
story.
Even like totally unhinged. Like tell me something.
But something very Wisconsin.
Yeah, like
okay.
I want something like Wisconsin.
So I once got lost in a cornfield by my grandpa's house and only found out where I was going because I ended up in his neighbor's cow pasture and I recognized one of the cows. That's pretty Wisconsin, right?
Yeah. Did you name the cow or were you just like that?
No, it was
spots?
I was like, I know this one because this is the one that always hangs out by my grandpa's house. So that's how I found my way back.
That's hilarious. I've never been able to identify a cow. So that definitely trumps my Wisconsin status.
I was like, that was the most Wisconsin thing I could think of.
Yeah.
So.
That's awesome. Yeah. I don't have one like specific to Wisconsin per se. Mine's just like we used to play in like new build houses in the neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
And like go and take like random like tools and nails and stuff. And then like go try and recreate our own house, like down in the forest somewhere.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'm really excited to get into your story because I think one of the most interesting things is it starts before substance use. It starts before a diagnosis even comes up. And I think it also helps give you a really amazing perspective that helped guide you through this. So let's go back there. Kody, kind of tell us about your childhood and your first experience with mental health was actually with your mother and being a caregiver for her. So we would love to hear about that.
Before I was ever diagnosed with schizophrenia, I was the caregiver for my mom who had schizoaffective disorder. So when I was a preteen, my mom started having auditory and visual hallucinations, delusions, and paranoia. And before that, she was a single mom raising 3 kids. She usually worked 2 or 3 jobs. And so it was very apparent when she started having symptoms because she wasn't able to take care of herself anymore. She was very confused. She was frustrated and scared. And like, it was very clear something was wrong. But living in rural Wisconsin, we didn't have resources. Like we didn't know who to go to. And unfortunately, something that's less common, but still something that happens around this area is people don't like talking about mental health and addiction. And so when it happens, instead of addressing it, we act like it's not happening. We act like it doesn't exist. And so when she started having symptoms, we didn't know how to help her because we couldn't turn to anyone to ask for help. Yeah.
Kids.
Yeah, we were kids. But even then, it's like if we had known that we could get her into peer support or if there was options out there that we were aware of, like we would have done anything to help her, but we didn't know. So she was the first like introduction I had to mental health or mental illness. And we don't talk about it a ton because it's her story, not mine, but she also is a recovering addict. And so that was also my first introduction to addiction because she was trying to do the same thing that I ended up doing later in life, which was
numbing
using drugs as a way to cope.
Yeah. My heart goes out to her because I can't imagine being a single mom and experiencing that. What was that like for you through your eyes? having to navigate that, but also like that's a lot of responsibility for a kid. How old did you say you were at that time?
Well, I was a preteen when her symptoms started.
Mhm.
So like I became her full-time caregiver in my early teenage years. Wow. And it was really frightening and frustrating because like we knew something was wrong, but she would see doctors. She wouldn't get any help. She wouldn't get any assistance. And then we were right back to where we were. So it was a lot of years of watching her struggle, watching her, fall into addiction, watching her not be able to get the help she needs. And so I knew very early on what the mental health system looked like, especially in small rural communities.
It's frustrating.
Yeah. And so like, even though we were kind of surrounded by a few bigger towns, like Madison is pretty close for me, but the town I grew up in was 2,000 people. My graduating class was 40 people. So like, like drive your tractor to school
like,
small.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And then, so like you're in school at this time. How is that affecting you in school? Just like with your friends and stuff?
I got picked on a lot. I got bullied a lot because that was my only parent and she was struggling. So she didn't work, which means we were, constantly behind on bills, and I had to start working at a really young age. So I got picked on, I got bullied a lot, but I had really good friends.
Oh, that makes me cringe. You're like, my mom was going through it. We had a hard time. I'm struggling. I had to
think about that.
They don't, but it is like when you become an adult and you hear these things about people's stories, even when you just catch up with someone that you haven't seen since like elementary or high school, and they're like, wow, so sorry, I was tormented. And you're like, yeah, people go through shit. I hope you remember that just as adults too, people are still constantly going through stuff.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I mean, otherwise, like I actually did fairly well in middle school and high school. I definitely struggled because of everything I had going on. But in late middle school, early high school, I kind of decided that I was going to go to school to be a teacher. And that kept me really motivated. Yeah. It kept me really like focused on what I wanted to do.
You were with the good kids.
Yeah.
Doing like drama club and stuff.
I was in the musical every year. I love that stuff, which my life as an influencer now, it makes sense.
Yeah.
That's very much in the realm of where I was. But I really planned on being a teacher, and I didn't get to do that because my first year of college is when I went through my own psychotic break.
Okay.
So up until that point, I was high functioning. I had never showed any signs of severe mental health issues or mental illness. And it wasn't until I left to go to college that I started having those symptoms, because up until that point, my mom was undiagnosed. She was still struggling. And then it was right before I went to college that she got her official diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder.
Wow. So that many years before you noticed, she noticed, reaching out for the help that you can, and that's out there, doctors and stuff. And it wasn't until you were about to go off to school that
almost a decade that she was struggling without any diagnosis or treatment. Yep.
Oh my goodness.
And unfortunately, the thing about illnesses like schizophrenia is the longer someone goes undiagnosed, the more cognitive damage it can have. So to this day, although my mom is better, she is still, she's unable to work. She's unable to have the type of functioning that I am, because I got care earlier. I got treatment earlier, and I got medication and access to all the things that she didn't have. And so it made a huge impact in my ability to recover, not just from my mental illness, but eventually from my addiction as well.
So you made it basically like to college, your mom gets diagnosed, and you still haven't exhibited any symptoms yet. You're not dabbling with substances.
Nope.
So then what happens when you get to college?
So she got her diagnosis of schizoaffective disorder. And then I went off to college, and my first semester of college, I don't know if it was the stress or being away from home or what it was, but I started having symptoms that I now know were the early symptoms of schizophrenia.
What were those for you?
The first thing I noticed was social isolation. Okay. I started to withdraw. I started to avoid being around people. And the reason for that was I was having paranoid thoughts. I thought, growing up with a mother with schizophrenia, I saw when she had to go into psychiatric facilities, stuff like that. And when these symptoms started, I got very paranoid that someone was going to lock me up or put me away. Okay. And so I started isolating myself. And shortly after that, I started having the auditory and visual hallucinations and the delusions. And that quickly led to me losing my job, because I had to work full time to pay for school.
Yeah.
So I lost my job. I eventually flunked out of college, and I didn't know how to cope with what I was going through. I was having all these symptoms. I didn't know who to talk to or what to do. So I turned to drugs as a way to kind of silence the voices I was hearing and get rid of some of those thoughts that I was having. So I found that addiction was kind of how I coped with it. And it wasn't helpful, but at the time I thought it was. I thought it was giving me moments of clarity, or I thought it was giving me the ability to function with all of the things I was experiencing.
Right. I mean, had you opened up to anybody at that point about what you were feeling or experiencing?
I never openly discussed any of the symptoms I had until I was diagnosed at 21 years old. So I went roughly 3 years where I was in active addiction, active psychosis. And I never really talked to anyone about it because I was extremely paranoid. I was extremely confused. And one of the frustrating things about an illness like schizophrenia is that I didn't realize I was struggling. I couldn't understand that I was having these symptoms. Even growing up being a caregiver for someone with schizophrenia, I always assumed that I would be able to navigate it better.
Yeah.
But once those symptoms started, my ability to understand things clearly went away. So I was basically in a complete delusional state. Things that should have made sense to me didn't. And so I was never able to really figure out that I was struggling until I was well into addiction and I ended up getting put in jail. And by then it was too late.
So when you start experiencing these oncoming symptoms, do you mind explaining what that is like? What are auditory hallucinations, visual hallucinations, and like what were those for you specifically?
So auditory and visual hallucinations are essentially things that I see or hear that aren't there. And this can be anything from, for me, auditory hallucinations can be voices, people talking around me. It can be one voice. It can be many voices. It can be sounds, helicopters, dogs barking, stuff like it can be anything that
so like everyday sounds.
Sometimes it can be everyday sounds. And so it makes it really hard when you're struggling to know that you're suffering with an illness, because to you in the moment, it feels real and it sounds real and it looks real.
Yeah.
So for visual hallucinations, it can be very different person to person living with schizophrenia. For me, when I first started having symptoms, it was a lot of what I would consider shadow people, people that are like there, but I can't really make out distinctive features. As time went on, my addiction made them more real to me, because not only was I going through a psychotic break, but going through active addiction, I was up days at a time. I was using, and it was making my symptoms more realistic in my mind, and it was making them scarier and harder to avoid. So even though I thought that it was giving me, help or clarity, it was actually making them worse long term.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Just exacerbating everything that's already going on inside. And that has to feel extremely isolating, especially not having opened up or sharing that or really knowing how to at that point.
Exactly.
And so you actually met your partner in high school, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then you guys were together in college?
Yeah. My wife and I started dating my senior year of high school. She was with me for about a year and a half before my symptoms started.
Did she notice those kind of oncoming things?
Yeah. So my wife knew about my mom and her diagnosis. And so when it started for me, she knew pretty much right away.
Really?
And so did my mom. Like when my wife told my mom what was going on, they both knew. And I think the frustrating thing for them was, they knew as soon as it started. And it took me roughly 2 or 3 years to actually get a diagnosis or get in for treatment or anything like that.
On your own accord?
After I got put in jail, you have like that forced sobriety a little bit. But because I was also still struggling with, my hallucinations, my delusions, I was undiagnosed when I went into jail. I had all this addiction going on. I had all this psychosis going on. And when I got out, I went temporarily back to using before they were able to get me to go see a doctor. And I didn't go in thinking that I had schizophrenia, but my mom and my wife spent that 2 or 3 years where I was struggling gathering resources. So if I ever reached out for help, they were able to get me into a doctor and a psychiatrist. So like from the day I reached out and I said, hey, I want to talk to a doctor. They had me within 2 weeks. I had a diagnosis, treatment, medication, access to insurance. And I get to travel all over the country and talk to patients in like big cities and small rural communities. And like 2 weeks is not a typical timeline for someone to be able to get access to care.
Yeah. Or any type of diagnosis.
No. Most people go months, if not years. Yeah. But because they had already kind of went and looked at resources and tried to figure out how to help me. And I had, family history of my mom's diagnosis. That made my process a lot quicker. So once I was able to get my diagnosis, I got medication and treatment. And that allowed me to properly deal with my addiction, because once I didn't have those symptoms, I didn't feel the need to use as much. So I still struggled with some of the, issues with addiction, where I did end up turning to other things that were less harmful and kept reducing the severity of what I was using. And now it's like my coping is basically tattoos and caffeine.
Love it.
Which is way better than
it's
what,
the best
what
type
it
of
was.
buzz you could get.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like I just found things that worked better for me, but without that care, without the access to medication and treatment, I don't think I ever would have got there.
So you said they were gathering resources for like 3 years?
Yeah. So the entire time I was struggling with my addiction and my psychosis, they were trying to get me to get help, but I was very delusional
that was my
at
question.
the time.
Like, were they bringing it up to you?
They did. After a while, I think they realized that I wasn't in a well enough place to accept help. And like, they didn't abandon me, but they definitely gave me the space to, like, they recognized that they weren't going to get me in unless I was forced to go in.
Right.
And so unfortunately, when I say, eventually I got incarcerated because of my addiction.
Oh, jail buddy right here. Yeah. Fellow jailbird.
Well, and that's the thing that it sucks, because anytime I talk to someone in the mental health community or the addiction community, it's like, that's where we ended up, because we didn't get the help we needed sooner.
100%. I always thought like it was substance related, and my issues were all mental health related. I just grabbed something to stop feeling this way. It's like, I can't be in my body, but if you want me to stay in this body, I can't feel this way.
Exactly.
So I have to get something else to not feel this way anymore. And it wasn't until like you learn how to stay in your body, and then you can like move past all that stuff and navigate further. But yes, while you're in that spot and then having to go to jail is probably one of the worst things, because it's not a rehabilitation place.
No,
it's a place for you to like sit and maybe watch court TV. And there's just not a lot of help. And when you're already struggling mentally, I mean, you can ask for help, but in my experience, it was writing down help on a piece of paper and hoping that one of the deputies in a couple of days would come and, are you okay?
Well, one of the frustrating stories I always talk about is the first time I actually asked to talk to a doctor or psychiatrist was while I was in jail. But because I was also a recovering addict, they refused to let me talk to anyone because they thought I was pill seeking.
Which is wild, because it's like I feel like most people don't just be like, you know what, I would like to be addicted to something.
Yeah, exactly.
They're trying to fix. So when someone's like, I'm trying to figure out a different way to fix, the fact that someone wasn't just jumping up and down ready to help is ridiculous.
And that's the thing. I only asked to talk to someone. Like, because it was while I was in jail that I didn't have distractions anymore. I didn't have drugs. I didn't have any sort of distractions.
Like your opportunity, like, I guess I can pay attention to myself.
Exactly.
Yep.
But I was still very delusional. I was still very, I was still in psychosis.
Yeah.
So the fact I reached out and was like, hey, I think something's wrong. I need to talk to a doctor, and then was refused, that could have been a huge turning point for me. And that could have saved me a lot of time, and it could have given me a good chunk of my life back. And unfortunately, prisons and jails are not adequately set up to deal with mental health or addiction resources, which is incredibly frustrating, because if you've been there, you know that a majority of people in jail and prison are not bad people. They are people struggling with addiction and mental health problems.
Right. Yep.
Like, I was shocked. I had this idea when I first went into jail that I was going to be surrounded by criminals and horrible people. I had never met people that I identified with more than when I was in jail, and I started
caring,
going to peer
empathetic
support.
people. Sometimes you're just like, God, they'll take care of you before anybody else.
Oh, and they did. So they were always the first to make sure that I was okay. Like guards. At this point, I'm talking to myself. I'm actively hallucinating. People could tell that I was struggling.
Yeah, the people that are paid to like watch out for this.
Yeah, and no one cared except for the people that were there with me. And so when I finally got out and I was able to ask my mom and my wife for help, at that point, I'm 3 years into, this whole journey. And as soon as I got my first antipsychotic medication, I started to have some clarity. And the unfortunate thing with that is, as soon as I had clarity, I got to see how bad things were.
Yeah.
It was like waking up from a 3-year dream, because I was in basically a delusional state that entire time. And the reality hit. And I am very lucky I had my mom, my wife, supportive people in my life, because the urge to start using again, at that point, I felt so defeated. And I think that's what a lot of people experience, not just with severe mental illness, but when you're someone struggling with addiction, and even if you get put in jail and you're able to get that kind of forced sobriety, when you get out and the realization hits you that life's going to be harder now, because not only is it going to be hard to find a place to live, but criminal records make it harder to get housing and to get jobs. And
I have all this stuff going against me.
Exactly.
It's like I was good in there. Of course I was good in there. As a cement box. Like what was I supposed to do?
Yeah, you couldn't do it. So it's like, it's so frustrating because I think that's why a lot of people go back to using, because you get out, you have no resources, you have no help. And it's really intimidating to see like, hey, I have to start not only from the beginning, you're starting behind.
Right.
Like when I started my medication and I basically came out of this, delusional state, I was looking at my life and I said, wow, not only do I have to start over, I'm starting way behind because I've lost relationships. Financially, I hurt myself a lot. There was all these things that I didn't deal with. It's a different type
of start over. It's like I'm starting over, but I feel like there's a stain or something that's just like lurking there that people can see this thing. And the second I have to put my name on this piece of paper, whether they know who I am or what's in here or not, all these thoughts and biases are just going to come up, and it's so fucking discouraging sometimes.
Well, and then even when you think of like people that know you, and I came from a very small town.
Yeah.
People knew about what had happened to me. People knew about my situation. And it was so frustrating because I at that point, I would have given anything to not be me. I just I wanted to be anyone else, because I knew that I was coming into the world with not only, a criminal record now, but everyone knew that I had used, everyone knew that I was an addict. And then I also had a diagnosis now. I was diagnosed with undifferentiated schizophrenia.
Can you describe what that is?
Yeah. So undifferentiated schizophrenia is, at the time, schizophrenia was diagnosed into subtypes.
Okay.
It's not anymore. So my diagnosis now is actually just schizophrenia.
Okay.
Because schizophrenia is a spectrum disorder now. It used to be diagnosed into subtypes, which were disorganized schizophrenia, catatonic schizophrenia, paranoid schizophrenia, and then undifferentiated. Undifferentiated essentially meant that I showed aspects of each subtype.
Gotcha.
Because I had like severe catatonia, I was paranoid, I had all of the symptoms that you would find in most of the other subtypes. So I was diagnosed with undifferentiated schizophrenia before it was changed with the diagnosis. I knew that being the son of a schizophrenia patient, I knew what people thought about diagnoses and medication in my small rural community.
You'd experienced it.
Yeah.
You had heard the things that they didn't say directly to the person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People would tell me that my mom was dangerous or that she should be locked up just for having that diagnosis. And so I knew the public perception on mental illness and on addiction and on taking medication. And so I had all of these things working against me, which was, it's so frustrating to come into the world ready to rebuild your life, and then you're starting from way behind.
Right. Not only the internal mental battle of it, but just other people's perception. So prior to going into jail, you did not have a diagnosis. You get out. What is the process then like for you getting help and getting that diagnosis?
It was actually super quick after I got out. So I got out. I had a little bit of an issue where I was afraid and I wanted to go back, and I wanted to go back to my old life of just numbing myself. And fortunately, that's when I reached out, and I reached out to my mom and my wife at the time, girlfriend. And I basically was like, hey, I just want to talk to someone. I had no idea that they had all these resources set up. I had no idea that I was going to get diagnosed. I knew something wasn't right. And it wasn't because I had insight into my diagnosis, but it was because I couldn't do what everyone else did. I wasn't able to work. I wasn't able to go to school. I didn't even think I could get through a single day without some sort of substance. So I just could tell something was wrong. And fortunately, like I said, they got me through that process very quickly. So within a couple weeks, suddenly now I had medication and I had some clarity, and I was able to really start recognizing how bad things were. And so it was only a few months after I got out that I started being able to rebuild my life and deal with my addiction. And so the year 2015 is when I got sober.
Yeah.
It was also the year I got out of jail. I got diagnosed with schizophrenia. So
it's a big year.
We're 10 years in now. This year is 10 years.
Congratulations.
Since all of that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's incredible. 10 years.
It's hard to believe.
Yeah. Does it feel like it kind of flew by? Like
I was working so much in that time. It's like you're not only are you trying to rebuild your life, you're trying to build a new life. So I always say that I don't think I really lived the life that I expected. I kind of had to mourn that old life, and I accepted that wasn't going to be the life that I was going to have. I wasn't going to get to be a teacher. I get to be an advocate now, which is a different form of teaching, and I love that. but it's not what I expected, and so a large part of the last 10 years has been not only making up for mistakes from my previous life, but also mourning that life and realizing that, like, because of my addiction, because of my mental illness, I have to live this life now, and I'm going to make the best of it, even if it's not what I thought it was going to be.
What are some of the things now you're experiencing in life that you didn't think were possible?
My life is crazy now. So, like, I always say that, like, I never expected to do any of the things that I currently do. So because of advocacy and social media, so I have over 2 million followers across social media.
Dang.
I've been on the cover of 2 different magazines. I was featured in Men's Mental Health magazine.
That's incredible.
I've been able to do just like really unbelievable. I wrote a book this year that, so I have a published book now, and everything that happens in my life currently feels fake. It doesn't feel real.
Yeah.
And so coming from like that point where I literally remember being in jail, undiagnosed, having active hallucinations, to go from that to this is even in 10 years feels unreal.
Yeah.
And so every day I feel like something new happens that I never thought possible. And even after I got sober and everything, there's that first couple months, first couple years where I feel like a lot of us just accept, like, we're not going to get to do things. We're not going to be able to live awesome, fulfilling lives.
Because you feel like it's better than that, but I get that I might not get that.
You just accept, like, you get back into recovery and you're like, you know what? It's not going to be great, but I'm going to do what I can just to get by.
Yeah.
And that's, I had kind of accepted that. And so when I started sharing my story on social media, the only thing up until that point that I had really done was peer support. So I had been through AA and NA. And for me, what really stuck was I found NAMI Peer Support Group.
Nice,
for anyone listening who doesn't know, NAMI is the National Alliance for Mental Illness. So I went to my very first peer support group in 2015. Again, big year for me. Last year, I was actually elected as the vice president of the board of directors for NAMI Wisconsin.
Congratulations. That's awesome. Yeah, that's super cool. I took my daughter to the walk downtown last year.
Yeah. So I love that organization, but also peer support saved my life because whether it was, AA, NA, or mental health peer support, all of those groups helped me realize that I wasn't alone and that there were other people struggling. When you grow up in a town of 2,000 people, and your graduating class is 40 people, and no one talks about mental illness or addiction, you feel very alone. And I think people in big cities feel alone struggling with these issues. But when you're secluded like that, it's very hard to recognize that someone else understands it. Not only understands it, but they can really like identify with what you've been through. And that gave me a feeling that, like, not only was I not alone, like, people were out there putting in the work. And when I went to peer support, I saw something I had never seen before, which was people in recovery struggling with mental illness that were living full functional lives. They had friends and jobs and families, and I never thought that was possible.
Yeah.
So peer support really saved me, and it allowed me to kind of find myself. And so that gave me the inspiration to start posting about my life.
Yeah.
And that's what gave me the inspiration to start doing my social media, which led to all of the wild things I get to do now.
I mean, I think the stigma around any mental health stuff is a huge hurdle to jump over, but the way you're able to really help explain things, like, this is just kind of my everyday, and I'm going to tell you a story to help you conceptualize what I'm dealing with. These silent things that go on with us, if you're not bleeding out of your head, like literally people are like, I don't see what anything's wrong with you. Like, you're going to a job, you look like a really nice guy. Like, what could be wrong with you? You're a good looking girl, that you can't possibly be depressed. But then you're showing someone like, I am a functional depressed person with OCD, anxiety, ADHD, who struggles every single day, and I'm here and I'm smiling. They're like, oh, but you're different.
Yeah.
And that is like the hardest part, because you're trying to show people literally what it is, and they have this like idea of what it is, and instead of like broadening their idea of what it is, they like pigeonhole you to other you when you're already isolated. Like, I'm isolated. Do not isolate me further. I'm trying to like gain the community by showing you and introducing you to this. Please don't other me right now within my own thing. This podcast is brought to you by Recovery.com. Recovery.com is a place where anyone can find mental health or addiction treatment options specific to them. You can filter by location, price, insurance coverage, therapy type, mental health condition, levels of care, and so much more. Recovery.com is the best place to find mental health or addiction treatment for anyone, anywhere.
Well, and social media is hard too, because everyone can say whatever they want behind the anonymity of the internet. So
everyone's a doctor.
Yeah.
Have you tried just not drinking milk?
Oh my God. I can't tell you like the amount of I love the community I've built on social media, but through the years, I've dealt with a lot of negativity and hate. And one of the things you just mentioned too was people early on not only would try to be like, oh, just do this or do that, but some people didn't believe that I had schizophrenia simply because their idea of schizophrenia is only whatever they saw on TV shows, movies, and media. They had never seen a person with schizophrenia just literally living a normal life. That they knew of.
Yeah.
Exactly. So one of the things I dealt with very early on was I had to convince people that I was living with schizophrenia just so they could identify that people with schizophrenia. Believe me, I'm still trying to figure it out. But I had to show everyone, tell everyone about my life, how it all started, where my journey started, tell them about my mom, build this whole platform around my diagnosis and everything. And that was actually never my intention with social media.
Yeah.
But what I realized was there was a lot of misinformation. There was a lot of stigma. And the only way for me to combat that was to show people hey, this is my life. This is what I've been through. This is the journey that I took to get to a person that you see in front of you who is fairly stable and fairly high functioning. And that is possible with a diagnosis like schizophrenia. We just don't ever see it in the media. We don't ever see it in
not
TV
in a healthy way.
Yeah, not in a productive or healthy way.
Right.
So that became a big part of my advocacy, was showing people that life with schizophrenia wasn't a death sentence, because that's what it feels like. When you're diagnosed with something like schizophrenia, you recognize that it's a lifelong illness. You're going to have to be on medication forever. And even with medication and treatment, it's still very hard. I still to this day have breakthrough symptoms. So I'll still experience auditory and visual hallucinations, which is hard because I travel a lot for advocacy, and I've dedicated my life to sharing about my diagnosis. And so you are battling all these things, and you also have to deal with the fact that a lot of us are recovering addicts. A lot of us have been incarcerated. We have all this trauma that's built up from the experiences we've been through, and you're kind of fighting an ongoing battle at any given time.
Right. So what have you learned about your own experience with schizophrenia that has kind of helped you progress in your recovery with substances, but also helped with other people and sharing that with other people?
I think one of the most beneficial things I ever did was start turning my advocacy into a platform where I can share other stories as well. So I spent years just sharing my story, which was very healing for me. It allowed me to deal with a lot of what I had been through. It allowed me to cope with, all of the things I experienced, but also I really wanted to start getting into sharing the stories of other people with my diagnosis. Because what I realized was not everyone's going to be able to identify with the story that I have. Not everyone's going to be able to relate to the straight white man who had all the resources and all the help that I could possibly ask for. A lot of people don't have family support or medication or access to insurance and all these things. And it helped me a lot when I started working with other advocates, not just in the mental health community, but in the addiction recovery community as well. I realized there was a lot of privilege in my own journey, and there was a lot that I had that a lot of people don't have. And I think that makes me a better advocate, sharing these stories and learning from people with different backgrounds, because growing up in a very small rural community, watching my mom struggle, that was my first introduction to addiction and mental health. But there are a lot of people who have opinions about addiction and mental health who have either never been a part of the community, they don't have anyone in their family struggling. And so they have this idea of bad people or lazy people or people, and they have no idea what someone else has been through or what their background is or where they were raised or how they were raised. And I'm saying, as a person who's been in this community, who is, someone with mental illness and has struggled with addiction, I still had this idea that my journey was like in some way the same as every single person.
Yeah.
And I think we all have similarities in our
You can like hear someone
recovery,
tell the story and you pick up on like little things and stuff.
but it's never exactly the same, and it's always unique.
Yes.
And I wanted to start showing that and conveying that. So I think that's the best thing I ever did in my advocacy journey was start working with other advocates, start sharing other stories of addiction and mental illness, and not just from, people that I know, but from people that I'm finding on social media, people that are very unique in their own perspective or backgrounds.
For your sobriety, what was like the turning point that pushed you towards that? Like, because we had talked about like sometimes you get put in that cell and you kind of just have to do what happens there. But like when you got out, you had a diagnosis and you're working through that. But when it comes to your sobriety, what was kind of like that aspect of the switch for you? Yeah.
So right after I got diagnosed in my early recovery, there was really brief relapses where it was like I had gotten out, but like I said, I realized how scary my future was going to be and how much work I was going to have
that moment
to put
of clarity, you're like, oh shit, like, everything around me right now, like I don't want to do this right now.
Not only is it scary, but and this sounds crazy when I say it out loud, but for a moment I thought that quitting my medication and going back to being completely unaware and delusional would actually be better.
I mean, sometimes it does sound better.
It does, like,
it's a lot of work.
Early on, like looking at everything I was going to have to do, I was like, this seems impossible. So for me, I think the big turning point was when I got that clarity and I started rebuilding my life, but I was still, I was still having cravings. I was still actively wanting to use. For me, I think the realization came that, I wasn't having symptoms anymore, but I still wanted access to drugs. I was like, I could tell that it was well past just my mental health stuff now. It was craving. It was like I needed it. And so I knew that if I didn't address it at that time, I was not going to be able to get around it. I was not going to be able to get the help I needed.
Yeah.
And so I once again turned back to peer support because for me, that's really been what's allowed me to feel less alone, but also recognize that I'm not weak because I have that feeling of needing something to cope.
Absolutely.
And that it's actually really common and a lot of people struggle with it. And that's where I first learned of harm reduction. So it's not that my addiction was just cut and dry ended there. It's just that I started transferring to less addictive things. So, for a long time, I went from, hard drug use to, pills, or I went from that to drinking, or that to cigarettes, or that to gambling, whatever it was. I tried to find the least harmful things to me. And so I joked early on in the episode that my newest addictions were tattoos and caffeine.
Yeah.
I would also add social media into that. I think TikTok is one of my addictions.
We're just talking about TikTok alerts.
Yeah. So, and like in that way, like those things might not be the healthiest for me, but compared to maybe what my addiction started out as, I always look at it as a win. And I think sometimes I fall back into like, there's times where I drink more than I probably need to. And there's times for me where, I've fallen into, for a while, I feel like I had a bit of a gambling issue. And so I've been able to recognize and deal with those things as they come up. And it's also helped me realize that my addiction wasn't just my drug use. It's something that is in me that is constant and changing, but it's not just Cody needs drugs.
Right.
It's Cody needs something.
Yeah. This dopamine hit. I don't know what it is.
It doesn't matter what it is. For a long time now, I've been really grateful that my advocacy, my social media allows me to live, it gives me a lot of that. It allows me to live a life where I get to do new things and like frightening things and scary things, but that's exciting and that's fulfilling fulfilling, and like it keeps me going, it keeps me motivated. And so I really like owe a lot to peer support, but also understanding that using something lesser than gave me a little more access to a sober life, just by not having to fall back into where I was before.
I mean, peers, man. I feel like in any situation you could possibly be in, peers that can relate to you are going to be the thing that helps get you out. Even in jail, we're not going to call other inmates our peer support group, but like that's exactly as we were sitting there talking about it, and then you're talking about like peer groups. I'm like, damn, that was my first peer recovery group.
My very, very first time ever being in an AA or NA meeting was in jail, and it's not because I wanted to go.
No, I needed to get out of the room for an hour. Yeah, it's rough. Wait, I have a question. So as someone who probably dealt with the same catering, what was your least favorite meal? I'll go first. Chicken sausage, because what the F is a chicken sausage?
I was going to say the chicken butt sandwiches, where they like, it's literally like, I had a friend who worked in the kitchen, and he's like, yeah, when we cut the chicken and turkey, it literally says chicken butts on it. Like they just cut off the worst parts, and we're like, yeah, send that to the jail. I was like, I don't think there's any good meal there.
No, I was living off of like cereal and cookies. Anyways, rough days.
Ramen noodles. That was
yeah.
Ramen noodles cooked with hot shower water.
Or like what is it, jailhouse burritos? Like the Doritos and ramen, and then they like smash them up in there. Anywho, I digress.
God, you just made me remember how much I love just having access to any fast food like in public. It's so like it's so weird.
Just being able to touch the ground when you want to. See sunlight. Yeah, freedom, man. Okay, so how did you go from sharing your story on TikTok to becoming like nationally recognized as a mental health advocate? Like, where did that just take off?
So TikTok allowed me to start getting offers to speak places. So it started with like local schools. We're like, hey, we found out that you're from this area.
Yeah.
You have this social media, and like you talk about your journey really well. So we'd love for you to come in and share about just mental health with our students. And then after that, I started getting offers from jails and prisons. So to go back and be able to share with inmates what got me through and how I got.
What's it like going back there?
Yeah. It's intimidating.
Okay, cool, yeah.
But also I think it's probably one of the most rewarding settings to do it in. Because like I love being able to talk at conferences and schools and stuff. But like when you're there, you're like, okay, like these people are in need of this.
This is someone who's going to hear my message and connect more than anybody possibly could. And someone that honestly sitting like roles reversed, I could have used that person.
100%.
I could have used anybody encouraging me.
And so what you just said also is kind of why I started becoming an advocate and why I decided to continue the speaking. And I really branched out. So like they were asking me to come speak and all that. And I realized that what I could do is I could be the voice that I needed when I was first diagnosed, or I could be the voice that I needed when I was first getting sober or made the decision to get sober.
Right. And you also have the perspective of somebody that was a caregiver to somebody that was struggling too.
Exactly.
So you can offer that help and assistance to somebody that needs that help and assistance, but also their family members who have so many questions, because the unknown of somebody who's dealing with the unknown is also extremely scary for them too.
Yeah, I would say caregivers are a big percentage of the people who follow me, follow my journey. And so it was because of a lot of those people that I kept getting offers to go speak. So it went from colleges and schools to eventually I was speaking at conferences. I was keynoting these conferences with hundreds or thousands of people. And every time I went back, it was like I was getting more and more invites. And eventually it kind of unintentionally became... I always think it's funny because one of the questions people always ask me is, oh, why do you choose to be a speaker or a mental health advocate? And I don't think anyone chooses to be a mental health advocate. I think it's bestowed upon us.
Right. Yeah.
But I think I say the same thing about being a speaker. Like I never intended for that to be what I do. But the very first time I did it, I realized that I could make a difference. And I also realized that I can talk about it in a way that maybe some people can't. Not everyone has the ability to talk about schizophrenia in the level of understanding that I am, both as a caregiver and as someone living with it.
Exactly.
Not everyone gets to get recovery soon enough to be able to have the cognitive ability to even discuss it. So like I find myself in a position where I feel a responsibility as someone who is more outgoing. And, I wanted to go to school to be a teacher. I had planned on being in front of people talking and helping people learn. And this is my way of doing that.
Yeah, you are a teacher. To me, you are a teacher. You are one of the most amazing teachers out there. You're teaching people compassion. You're teaching people how to encourage themselves to seek help. And I think that's extremely important. So thank you.
Yeah, of course.
So I would love to know, like, what does a good day look like for you? Because anybody that struggles with mental health, like the person that other people might see is just like this picture of the stuff that we are internally dealing with. So I would love to know what a good day looks like for you.
One of the things I've really tried to show over the last few years, especially in my advocacy and social media journey, is that my good days are not few and far in between, but they are still surrounded heavily by days where I'm symptomatic or days where I might still have cravings or days where I might still be struggling. So 10 years into my journey, I want people to realize that it's normal to have bad days. So my best days are days where I get through the whole day without thinking about my addiction or mental health. And I think that's not often, you know. I think most days I have something that requires me to deal with either my past of addiction or my current mental health struggles and my current mental illness diagnosis. So every single day I'm just trying to get through that day. I don't really look far ahead. I don't think that I set goals that far ahead. Like my daily to-do list, that's my goal. Yeah. And whatever comes after that, like I said, I've been able to be a part of some really amazing projects.
Like you're doing pretty well for that. Yeah.
Well, and no joke, I always talk about this. I first started doing to-do lists right after my diagnosis and I got sober. Every single day I make a to-do list. And when I was first diagnosed and I was starting my sobriety, my to-do list used to only have 2 or 3 things on it. And it used to be wake up, take medication. Because at one point in my life, that's the most I could do. Now I get to make to-do lists that say like, talk to my publisher, or no joke, this actually happened. I got to write, go to the White House on my to-do list because I got invited to go talk to, and I'm like, so here's the thing is like, I am a firm believer that like, if you take things day by day, things will work out. And sometimes I think as not only people in recovery, but especially people who are, like trying to become advocates, I think we want to take on too much and it's overwhelming. And then our day to day becomes very difficult.
Because you're trying to fix the world.
Exactly.
Instead of the things that are like right in front of you that you can have such a great impact on.
And I think if you do those things long enough, you can make big impacts in the world. And that's coming from someone who never thought I would be one of those people. But now I get to share my social media has collectively over 1 billion views across platforms, which is unbelievable. I've literally been viewed on every continent of the planet.
That's wild.
Did I ever think that many people would care about what an addict had to say or what a mentally ill person had? Absolutely not. Yeah. But people do care. And we are creating a world with more understanding, more empathy. And I think we're really getting close to people understanding how much we need help and resources. And we're making big steps, but there's still a lot of work to be done.
Right. And I think that also goes a lot along with your mother's ability to get help and the time that it took, your ability to get help and the time that it took. A lot smaller. And do you feel that that had an effect on how you're able to live your life now?
Yeah. I think the reason I'm able to be a little more high functioning and have more of a cognitive ability was because of that early intervention and early diagnosis. It's really frustrating because I do see constantly, anytime I see someone struggling with mental illness, I know that it's a ticking time bomb. We need to get them access to care, access to help. But unfortunately, depending on where someone lives or what type of insurance they have or what kind of family support they have, they might never get that help or we might not get to them until it's too late. So that's why I do a lot of advocacy now with not just, in conferences and speaking and stuff. I'm doing a lot more advocacy on the legislative level, trying to talk to people that are making those decisions us, because I think that's where change happens. And even if we don't like politics and we don't want to be in that conversation, that's where we are able to really start getting people to understand the access to care and resources is needed.
100%. What were some of the resources that your mom and wife had gathered together?
One of the things actually was the peer support group I went to. So the NAMI peer support group, I only found out about that because of them. But the main things that they did were when I wanted to talk to a doctor, I didn't realize that they had already set it up for when I went to that doctor, they were able to get an immediate referral to a psychiatrist. Some people, especially in small rural communities like where I'm from, even if they know that they need help, they could be struggling with schizophrenia, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. It can still take weeks, if not months, to get a single appointment. I was able to get in a few days after going to the doctor. I was able to get into a psychiatrist. I was like, they had all this planned out because they knew that if I reached out and said, hey, I want to talk to a doctor, it was a brief window.
Yeah.
They needed to get me in because with someone who's paranoid or delusional, you don't have a lot of time. And that's why a lot of people end up in jail or homeless, because we don't take advantage of those windows of opportunity where we can get them the help they need.
Yeah. So imagine there's someone out there right now who is struggling. What is something that you would want them to hear?
The two things that I wanted to hear when I was diagnosed was that, one, mental illness isn't a death sentence. There is a life and future after a diagnosis.
An amazing life.
And it might not be what you think it's going to be. You know, I still tell people I have a really incredible life now, but if I could go back and not have the mental illness, not have the addiction, I would take it in a heartbeat for a regular, normal life. And I would. But I think it's important for people to hear that it's not the end of your life. It's the end of that life. And you have to mourn that life and move forward. But I also think it's important for people to remember that you're not alone, because that's how we all feel.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you're in New York City surrounded by millions of people, or if you grew up in Westby, Wisconsin with 2,000 people around you. There are people around you that are in the same boat and need help and need assistance. And I think just knowing that gives us all a little bit of accepting.
Right.
Because like it's hard to accept that you alone are weak or struggling or whatever you think you are. It's a lot better to realize that you are struggling momentarily and that there are people around you who are going through it or who have been through it.
Right. And mental health issues, I mean, your spicy brains will make you think that that is wrong and that like being alone is best. And it's the absolute most incorrect thing. Get out there, find community, find support groups, find people who have walked that journey and can kind of help you feel. I know that there was nothing better than, even if we could have been going through completely different things and I didn't need to know that mine was going to end up your way, but just to have any type of support from somebody that's walked through those journeys is huge. Yeah. It feels like such like an amazing hand to hold. If there's something that someone could get out of your story, what do you hope that is?
For me, it's always hope. Yeah. I just want people early on in their journey to have hope for a future. And that's the one thing I didn't have. After I was diagnosed, I self-isolated. I didn't want to be around people. I didn't want to be out in public. I knew what people were going to think of me if they knew about my diagnosis or they knew about my past of addiction. And I've been able to not only keep hope through a lot of that journey, but I've been able to turn hope into really amazing things. And so I only ever want people to leave a room where I'm sharing my story with a little more hope for either for their own journey or a journey that they're going through with a loved one or whatever it is. I just want people to know that there is a chance that you can live a full, fulfilling life and be able to do things that you never thought possible.
Your story is a testament to that. Thank you so much. And thank you so much for joining us today and for sharing and being vulnerable and just opening up and having this conversation with us. I really appreciate your want to help break that stigma and share so that everybody else can kind of, get on that same page with things. So everybody, I want you to know his socials. So shout out your socials. Where can people find you?
People can find me on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook. My username is Schizophrenic Hippie on every platform.
And your book?
My book is called Minds Over Meetings. It's about mental health and mental illness in the workplace.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And also people can find me on LinkedIn too.
Yeah. Thank you so much. And thank you all for joining us today. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.